Okay, so you like to draw, but maybe you have a certain goal in mind where you want to be, and you don't really know what it takes to get there. What should be next on your checklist of things that you need to practice? Well, don't worry, because in today's video, well, you've seen the thumbnail of this video, you know where this is going. Hi guys, my name... I don't know, just pick one. People make whole tier lists of my names now where my actual name is D tier, come on! Alright, so obviously when it comes to your art, you guys have different goals. So maybe you want to be better with drawing faces, others would like to improve drawing bodies, whatever floats your boat. But obviously, you're not good enough yet. So I've made checklists on different topics depending on what your next big art goal is and what you need to practice in order to get there. But not only that, because for every checkpoint I also linked the right tutorial so you immediately have a way to practice everything you still need. All the links are down below for every checkpoint in this video. But please be aware, mastering one point here could occupy you for like a month or so. Be thorough with all of these tutorials. I made whole books about all of this in case you're interested, but for now, let's check out some checklists. LineQuality. Over the years, the faces that I have drawn changed a lot, and I'm going to give you a checklist so that you don't need 10 years in order to draw faces like these. I didn't believe it myself at first, but yes, you can totally tell whether someone actually learned how to draw faces properly beforehand, or if someone only used comics or anime as a reference, aka me at the beginning. So here's the checklist for how I would learn how to draw faces like these as fast as possible if I were to start over. People often comment that my drawings and lines look clean and ask how to achieve that. You might know this tip from art class: no chicken scratching, draw clean lines, and so on. But for real now, that is actual good advice. If you're still drawing like this, you need to change that. You'll be tearing your hair out later on when you try to draw faces the way I or other pros draw them if you can't draw clean lines. Especially when you try to draw faces in perspective, you'll have no idea what's going on without clean lines. I already mentioned it, I've linked an exercise for every checkpoint, so feel free to check out the exercise I've linked here so you can get cleaner lines. The next checkpoint is perspective. A lot of people fall into the trap of just watching a few tutorials and copying faces, and then sure, they can draw faces from the front and from the side, but from that point on, all of their faces look the same. In that case, you still can't actually draw a face. You can copy the same drawing of a face over and over again, but you can't independently draw your own face from imagination. And that's exactly what we want for you. But jumping straight into drawing a full head in perspective is gonna be really tough for the start. So let's first check out how solid your perspective drawing actually is. If this exercise here that I've linked for you gives you trouble, that's when you know you need to practice this a bit more. But if doing this exercise feels too easy, then we can jump right to the next one. So now that you can draw properly in perspective, you can start trying to draw more complex objects in perspective. In the end, a face is nothing more than a bunch of objects slapped together. You've definitely seen those drawings where complex heads are broken down into shapes first. This is going to be the next exercise before we get into faces. The break objects down into parts and put them back together exercise, aka shape design. Because you're designing the object purely out of shapes. Don't worry, you don't need to be able to draw something like this here right away. I know that's still too hard at this point on the checklist. I've linked a really simple exercise below where you can learn how to draw more complex shapes using basic examples. Now we're finally getting into drawing faces by using the Loomis method. You've probably seen it, it's the one with the circle on the side of the head. And I know, maybe you don't want to learn how to draw traditional faces like these. You probably want to draw in some kind of aesthetic modern style. But whether you draw like this or like that, it doesn't matter for now. Your goal for now is to understand where to place what landmark to actually understand faces. just so you don't pull a Quasimodo and struggle to place the individual features correctly, aka the I can't even draw the second eye issue. That's exactly what the Loomis method is for, learning where to place the eyes, how big things need to be drawn, and so on. What style you want to make this later, that's completely up to you. So definitely take a few weeks for this one. This method is genuinely not easy. One more urgent recommendation I have for you is to look into the planes of the head. This polygon view here is the Azaro method, and I always find it so satisfying how perfectly everything fits together here. I think it's really useful sometimes to just have these planes in mind when I get stuck on a face, because they can sometimes be easier to visualize than measuring everything out with the Loomis method. I compared it like this before. Working with the Azaro planes feels like putting together a puzzle, while the Loomis method feels more like solving a Sudoku. When I draw, I basically always use Loomis measurements, and then I use the Azaro planes to double check my drawing. I don't have a tutorial for this one. I would just recommend looking up planes and getting familiar with it. The last open question now is, how do I get from this to that? This process is called stylization. You take basically any drawing and then shift the style according to your own personal taste. But which art style? This one, that one, that one, that one, that one. Obviously, I can't make a tutorial covering every single art style in the world, but I do have an older video of mine on how to create and draw your own art style. The most important thing is that you're able to draw a solid base. What style you apply on top of that, that's up to you to decide. Alright, chances are you are really into anime or manga. Maybe you even want to publish your own manga or want to take animation jobs just like I did. In that case, here's a tool of mine that I've used in every project of mine, and that's Milanote, today's sponsor. And I mean that, I recommended Milanote even without being sponsored before, because Milanote's a free tool that you can use to organize big projects like your own manga or comic. When I make big projects like this anime commercial for a biker fashion brand or my latest manga, having a visual overview like this is so useful. I made a whole board on characters, a board on story overview, references, everything you would need. You can tell this tool was made for creative people. They even make color swatches for your character sheets. This is how I get big companies to hire me, since this looks a lot more professional than a Word document or something. It's also super easy to start new projects. There are over 100 templates to choose from, like character design, for example. You could easily use a character design template. Or for the anime commercial that I animated, I obviously needed a storyboard. You can easily just use Milanote's motion design storyboard template and you pretty much get the exact same thing that I have, since you can also just replace images. Actual animation studios also use tools like these in order to organize their anime project, because you can use Milanote online together with your colleagues. This is especially useful when you're working with a story writer like I do. There are some built-in tutorials for all of this, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory since all of it is just drag and drop. They even have a mobile app now in case you have some ideas on the go and need to add them to your board. And how much does all of this cost? Exactly, it's free without a time limit if you're using my link to sign up to Milanote. Alright, now let's take a look at the next checklist about drawing bodies. Okay, how many times have you experienced this? You want to learn how to draw bodies, everyone tells you, just learn anatomy, so you do that, but your drawings are still ass. Spoiler, detailed anatomy is way down on this checklist, because detailed anatomy, at least, is really just finishing touches. But obviously you would want to know where to start. And again, we are starting from the very beginning. Same as with the other checklist, you need to be able to draw clean lines. With heads, it's already a disaster if you're still chicken scratching and you can't draw clean lines, and the same goes for the rest of the body as well. So yeah, strong recommendation to learn how to draw clean lines. First, there's literally no point in starting anything else before that. Exercises are all linked down below, same as with the other checklists. Now, a body consists of moving parts, but the three most important parts are the head, the chest, and the pelvis. And the key thing is being able to rotate and put together those parts in perspective if you want to learn how to pose a figure dynamically. So yes, the next exercise is rotating these objects. Because obviously, if you can't draw simple objects in perspective, you also can't draw this. And then you definitely can't draw this either. That's why this is the current stop on the journey, getting really solid at perspective. Okay, now at this point, try copying a few poses from photos. Thanks to that last exercise, you can now rotate and draw simple objects. And yes, you should always be using references for all steps on this checklist. You definitely need to build a good feel for how people stand, and it's best to practice that at this early stage when your drawings are still simple. You can easily spend weeks on this. Getting characters to convincingly stand is one of the hardest things beginners have to tackle when learning how to draw a body. I've linked some extra resources below in case this is still giving you trouble. At this point, I think it's become clear that you don't immediately draw a body like that right off the bat. Instead, you build it up out of rough parts before going into detail. This is called simplifying, but wait, there are so many ways to simplify a body. Do you use like ovals, or you use boxes and spheres? And don't worry, there isn't one objective best method. I think it just helps to have gone through the process of building up a person from scratch at least a couple of times. And the video I've linked below isn't perfect, but it's easy to follow and approachable enough for you to get started. If you're watching videos about drawing a lot, you've probably seen the bean shape people use to draw figures with. It's been used for decades as a go-to form for human figures because of how easily you can bend and adjust it. And that is called shape design. Basically manipulating and bending shapes so they can match the human body. If you don't bend and manipulate shapes, the finished body will always look really stiff. As always, I would recommend practicing this nice and simple first. Bending and manipulating a shape can feel a little strange at the beginning, but you'll get the hang of it eventually. Okay, you've probably seen this one coming. It's about gesture drawing. Because no matter how good you might already be, it's hard to keep bodies from looking super stiff. Life or gesture drawing is an exercise for getting more organic drawing. The whole point of this exercise is just to capture the gesture of the model. So the goal is not to draw a body perfectly. It's also really helpful here that you might already have shape design under your belt, so drawing simple forms will be a lot easier like this. The next problem you might run into is that you've handling everything pretty well so far, but your sense of proportion is completely off. Meaning you still need to develop a feel for how long the limbs are, how much volume they have, etc. And yeah, I know you look at the envelope method and you think, what? Why? Everyone knows how long an arm or a leg is. Why would I need to practice that? But trust me, proportions are so incredibly hard. You will see it when you do the exercise. This exercise teaches you how to measure things yourself and how to understand the dimensions of the human body better. But it's so hard. But I mean, we're at the end of the list, so it makes sense that this is gonna be a lot more demanding. Okay, so at this point you can perfectly draw the framework of the human figure. Now, it's time to really get into detail. Because detailed anatomy should always be the final polish at the end, not the foundation. Anatomy is a massive topic. There are millions of references out there. Books, online resources, 3D models. You know what? At this point, just go ahead and find references that work well for you and start doing exercises and studies. Especially with shape design, you can now manipulate bodies and muscles properly. And now it's up to you what you do with it. Happy studying! For the third and final checklist, I let you guys decide the topic. And the majority of you guys were definitely into rendering. Make a tutorial on how to spell your name correctly. Bro, what? It's only 6 letters! If rendering doesn't ring a bell, you can translate it as finishing touches. So shading, hatching, texturing, everything that comes at the end. Most of you guys want to do manga, so cross-hatching and shading in particular is the bread and butter here. let's take a look at something that's really detailed. Take a closer look at the hatching and the shading of these artworks. One thing I want to point out immediately here, the shading always follows the form. That's important. This whole thing wouldn't even look half as impressive if someone just shaded over it without following the form. This matters for every type of shading, even your typical anime cell shading is affected by this. So no matter what kind of shading you specialize in, if you don't stick to the form, it's not going to look good. So again, understand the form first, then you'll be able to render your art much better. Just like with the other two checklists, the right exercise is linked below and you can practice analyzing forms and understanding how to best follow the shapes. Okay, now that we want to start hatching, there are certain rules to this. I actually demonstrated this live on stream a couple of weeks ago. Someone asked how hatching even works, and I showed them by using this simple hoodie right here. So let's say I would want to shade the hood of this drawing, nice and simple. First step I would do is to divide it into even sections, just like in the exercise from the last checkpoint. You can see how I follow the form here and don't just draw straight lines. And once I've broken it down, here comes the key part. The section that's supposed to be darker, I divide into way more parts. And now, if I want to get even darker, I do the same thing again and again and again with cross hatching. That's when your lines go across. You can do this with liners and ballpoint pens or ink. It has a really cool effect either way. More info about all of that in the cross hatching video linked down below. Now up to this point, I would say if you're an advanced artist already, you probably knew most of this, but the next step is going a bit more into detail. When you're shading something with straight lines, it obviously looks like a very smooth surface. Now the question is, what do you do when you're drawing something that's not a smooth surface, like fur or scales? With textures, you can mimic different surfaces. It would look weird, for example, if a fish was just shaded completely smooth without scales. The surface would look completely off. So especially if you want to get into drawing things that are not human, like objects or animals, this is something you should definitely look into. Now, I would say up to this point, you already understand the basics. You can now understand forms and also shade or hatch pretty decently. But rendering and shading is more than just making things black and white. All of this has so many more nuances. If you've looked at my artwork, you can see how much I like to play with light. Whether it's a realistic portrait or anime, without complex lighting, the images would all look pretty boring, at least in my opinion. The style you're drawing doesn't matter. To be able to play with light requires you to understand how light works. As you see, I've included anime examples too, and in the linked below video I cover everything from portraits to anime. And once you've learned this, let's now apply it. At this point, you know how shading works in detail, but how do you apply it to a face? The answer is simplify. Earlier in my faces checklist, I already showed you how you can easily break a face down into different planes. And that helps a lot with drawing light and shadows. Don't forget, when in doubt as an artist, you can always go from rough to detail. So you first look at what is how bright, and then you apply it roughly onto your drawing. And then what you've learned from before comes into play. Understanding how the form works and drawing along that shape. And now you do that over and over and over and over again, and this exact process is called rendering. And simplifying your drawing and approaching it the way I just showed you is by far the most powerful tool you have here. I work like this every chance I get. Arcane has already proven that a simple Azaro head can look good in action, because those characters all have exactly these simplified faces. Oh hey look, that's from my workshop! Thanks to everyone who always joins my workshops! I can of course recommend using Azaro planes like these when it comes to simplifying people and link a video to help, but obviously if you want to draw or paint something else than a human, there is not a tutorial for every object out there in the world. At some point you have to learn independently how to simplify. So now it's up to you to do your own studies. But I want to leave you with one more tip when it comes to rendering, and that's something people tend to overlook. Edge control, simply put, is just paying attention to whether you shade and render with hard edges or soft edges. Overall, there are 4 types of edges in artworks, and yes, this matters not just in painting, but also in hatching. Once you know how edge control works, you'll always have it in the back of your mind, and it will definitely change how you render images, because just as Remote Ghost already puts it, every great artist edges. Damn, that was one big video. But I hope you guys now have a better idea on where you are and what you still need to practice. Don't forget to check out Milanote if you plan on starting a big project soon. And otherwise, well, I'll see you guys next time.